Okay. Everybody say hey.
Hey!
Look at everybody. Yeah. All right, it's 7 people. Cool. Set this up real quick. Okay. Well, tonight, my speech is basically an informational speech, and I wanted to inform you guys on wine, basically oversimplifying everything so that way next time you go into a store, you can just buy some wine without being scared or intimidated. I don't know about you guys, but walking into a wine store and being completely overwhelmed by the sheer amount of bottles and all these different names, varietals, and things like that make me freak out. It makes me want to turn away and find the cheapest and most familiar bottle that I can find. But now that I've been around it, it's been great. So that was a thing of the past. Luckily, I've been surrounded and informed by all this wine for a little bit more than a year and a half now. All I want to do is basically share all of this knowledge with you, so that makes everything simple. So, from what I've noticed, people tend to be a bit intimidated, like I said, by such a large amount of wine. They'll notice different grapes, different styles, different varietals, different vintages, just a vast amount of different things, and that's going to scare some people. They'll notice, basically it's plenty of different factors that seem daunting. It might actually deter you guys from buying wine in general. So, basically all I want to do is break down everything for you. There's plenty of different methods to help simplify the browsing process and to, like I said, make everything easier for you to buy. So that way you can go home and take a decent bottle of wine for yourself or for friends or whatever you want to do. First, you want to determine whether you want a white wine or a red wine. Generally, I'll have people answer this question as if you basically take a large group of something, split it in half. It's the best way to do it. It's the easiest method to narrow the selection down. So, like I said, you have this Pinot Grigio, for example, or this Cabernet Sauvignon. They're two completely different wines, but the basic thing about them is one's white and one is red. Typically, people will tend to try and match their wine with food or find something that's good in season. And when I say that's good in season, it basically means that the weather is a determinant factor in choosing a certain style or a blend. But I'll mention that a little bit later. Second, you want to determine whether or not you want a sweet wine or a dry wine. Now, if you don't know what dry means, that's all you want to do is just ask yourself, do you want a sweet wine or just not a sweet wine? That's really the only question. According to Paul Kreider in his book, Uncorked, The Novice's Guide to Wine, and I'll quote from him real quick. The way he breaks it down is that he defines the term dry to be the resulting taste of when the grapes are fermented fully, basically meaning that there's no sugar left in the juice itself. So, the dry sensation that you actually get when you're drinking some wine is known as tannin. Many people will actually define or confuse the dry sensation, with the term dry. It's really just the tannin that you're tasting. Generally, wines with a higher alcohol content will be considered dry, mainly because all of the sugar that's within the juice itself has been fermented. They will also have a lot of tannin, though. So, essentially, the two terms do coincide. If you have a tannic wine, you're going to have a dry wine. That's basically all that means. The only exception to this rule are ports and sherries, and these are what are known as fortified wines. That basically means that after fermentation, additional sugar is added, and what that does is that the additional sugar provides more for the fermentation process to produce higher alcohol content, but in turn also makes the wine a bit sweeter. These two styles of wine are also known as dessert wines. You eat it or you drink them after you eat. I mean, they're really, like I said, really high in alcohol content, so it'll make everything a bit more smoother. Now, after those two factors, what you want to do is you want to kind of determine whether or not, and this is how I ask people, you want to determine whether or not you want a heavy wine or a light wine. And some people will actually know what I'm talking about, whereas others still might not have a clue. Wine Enthusiast, an editorial company that comes out with new ratings and reviews almost every month, describes wine in two different terms. They call it either feminine or masculine. And quoting them, what they define light-bodied or heavy-bodied wines are a wine that is light, refined, and delicate might actually be called feminine. The polar opposite of those so-called masculine qualities in wine, which are strong, muscular, larger, and bigger. Now, usually the way that I explain these things is that the lighter body wines tend to be a bit fruity, crisp, effervescent, so they have a lot more like fruit flavor or fruit nose in general, and definitely lightly colored, as I mentioned in this Pinot Grigio. So this is a light-bodied wine in general. What you want to do is define what you want or try and figure out what you want. Now, the lighter body wines are usually bigger hits in the warmer months, and they also go very well with a vast majority of different types of food. The heavier wines, like this Cabernet Sauvignon, this one is big and bold in flavor. Now, these guys usually are reminiscent of smoke, leather, spices, sometimes tobacco as well. These guys will help you keep warm and complement heartier meals. So usually they're a bit more popular in the fall months going through spring. Once you hit spring all the way through summer, you're going to try, most people will try and drink some, lighter body wines, as I mentioned before, like a Pinot Grigio or Sauvignon Blanc. Now, at this point, you would have hopefully selected a red or a white, a sweet or a dry, or even a heavier light body wine, something to narrow the entire selection down. The next general step is basically to determine whether your price range is good for these wines or not, but it's all on you. Now, unfortunately, there is a stigma on wine in general, basically stating that everything underneath $20 is very meh. That's entirely false. There's actually a plethora of wine that is fantastic under $20. So, all you want to do is basically stick within your budget, explore the wine aisles, and don't let others tell you what's good or not, and whether or not a good bottle of wine has to be expensive, because like I said before, that's extremely false. I found lots of bottles under $10 that are just amazing. Karen McNeil, actually, the author of the Wine Bible, which is something that almost every sommelier uses to help pass their exams, she mentions, and this is quote for quote, or I quote her basically, that there are some amazingly good wines for $5 a bottle, nothing less or nothing more. You can find everything that you want within that price range. So all you want to do is just find what you're comfortable with, and don't be afraid to ask other people for help, because there's plenty of other people that want to help you and find the great bottle of wine that you want to take home. The more you learn and the more you try will possibly make you want to expand and try other varietals and blends. And this is the biggest issue with people. As I mentioned before, when you walk into a store and you see a huge selection, you're going to be intimidated. Don't worry though. Everything is simple. Just ask people, and next thing you know, you'll go home with a nice bottle of wine within your budget. You'll begin to enjoy wine and ignore the old belief that good wine is actually reserved for classy people. Ignore that. Pound for pound, you are the classiest person you know. So get out there and try some wine. But remember, as Paul Creeder mentions in his book, and I'll read this to you guys real quick, the difference between that person is very knowledgeable about wine and that guy's a wine snob is all in how the information in one's knowledge base is delivered. So, once you get to know wine a little bit more, don't be a snob. Just enjoy it and then try and share everything about it. Let your friends in. It's a happy thing. Drink and be merry. So, thank you, and hopefully that has made everything a little bit more easier for you guys. So hopefully next time you go to the store, you can get yourself a nice bottle of wine and enjoy it. Good night.